Okay, so today we're going to sketch sinusoidal graphs or sine and cosine curves. So we're going to use all the stuff that we learned last week about the graphs to do a graph. And we did some basic graphs like on the first day, but they didn't have any kind of shifting. So this is going to definitely be more challenging for you guys. But we're going to start off the exact same way, and that's finding the amplitude, period, and any kind of shift that the graph has. All right, if there's addition or subtraction inside the parentheses, that means there's going to be a horizontal shift or a phase shift. And then if there's addition or subtraction outside, then that's going to be a vertical shift. This one doesn't have a vertical, but it does have a horizontal shift. Okay, so those of you that were here, what would you say the amplitude is? 3. So the amplitude is going to be the absolute value of whatever number you see first. Okay, and then for the period, we're going to take 2 pi, and we're going to divide it by whatever is being multiplied by x, which in this case is 1/2. Now, dividing by 1/2 and taking 1/2 are not the same. So when you're dividing by 1/2, what do? Yes, multiply by the reciprocal. So the period in this case is going to be 4 pi. So it's going to take 4 pi, the distance of 4 pi, to complete a period of sine. All right, and then for the horizontal shift, we take this number. If there isn't like parentheses inside the parentheses, what you're going to do is take this number and divide it by this number. So pi over 2 divided by 1 over 2, or pi over 2 times the reciprocal. So that's going to be pi units. And then which direction? To the right. So if it's subtraction, it's to the right. If it's addition, it's to the left. All right. So we have everything we need really to do the graph. And so we're gonna do the graph. I'm gonna write a whole bunch of steps down, and then after we get the steps written down, we'll just work the graphs from now on. So what I want you guys to do over on the side, I want you to draw a pretty long x-axis. So a kind of long. Let me try that again. A long horizontal line, and that's going to be our x-axis. All right. So in the normally sine starts at 0. So for those of you that weren't here, sine starts at 0, 0, and then you have a max, and then a middle, and then a min, and then a middle. That's one period of sine. But this one has been shifted. So where should that new starting point of our sine be? If that where it's normally 0 is shifted pi to the right. It should be at pi. So if it's to the right, it's going to be a positive pi. And so what we're going to do is put that right in the middle of our x-axis. All right, so I'm going to write down what we did over to the side. So label the middle of x-axis according to the shift. We'll say horizontal shift. All right. And then we need to figure out what's going to be at the end of this period. So we're going to start here and do a sine curve. We need to figure out where this ends. Any ideas? It's not going to be 4 pi. If it had been 0, it would be 4 pi, but we're starting at pi. So it should be 5 pi. So how did you guys do that? You add the period. So add the period to find the end. Now, just like I graphed that, each sine curve and each cosine curve has 5 key points that are either in the middle or at max or min. So what we found are 2 of the key points on our axis for this particular graph. So what we need to do is find the other 3. And so one of them is going to be halfway between those. So what's halfway between pi and 5 pi? It's the average. So you add them together and divide by 2. Yes. So when you add them, you get 6 pi divided by 2 is 3 pi. All right, and then we're going to find halfway between pi and 3 pi. And then halfway between 3 pi and 5 pi. Now, sometimes it's a pretty distinct pattern that you can see, and then you wouldn't necessarily have to do all the halfways. You can just see how it works. But if you ever get stuck on halfway, it's the average. You just add the numbers together and divide by 2, and that's it. Okay, so let's write down. We find halfway points. And if you don't remember or it's not obvious to you, you're going to do the average. So you're going to add the 2 sides together and divide by 2. All right, now our directions are to graph 2 full periods. So doing the sine curve for that would be a period, but we're going to also do a period on the other side of pi. So how am I going to figure out that value? Negative 3 pi. You're going to subtract. You're going to take this pi and subtract the period from it. So it's going to be negative 3 pi. All right, so let's see if I got room to write. Yes. All right, so subtract the period to find the left end. Right, and then it's just more halfway points. You probably can see the pattern, but if not, it's okay. So if we wanted to find halfway between negative 3 pi and pi, you're going to add them together and divide by 2. What's halfway between negative pi and pi? That's a 0. All right. Now, all of these need a y-axis. So we drew the x-axis. They all need the y-axis. Where is the y-axis going to be? At 0. So wherever x is 0, that's where you're going to draw the y-axis. Now, if 0 is not one of your special points, then you just draw the y-axis where 0 should be, even if it's not going to be a max or a min. All right, so let me write that. So the y-axis is at x equals 0. All right, now we do need to label the y-axis. What do you think, out of those things that we found first, what do you think is important for the y-axis, those of you that have been here? A 3, yeah. So it's going to go up to it's going to go up to 3 at the max and down to negative 3 at the min. So you can put like 3 tick marks and label the top one 3, or you can just put 1 mark and label it 3 and 1 mark and label it negative 3. Okay, so now all we have left to do is draw the appropriate curve. So sine looks like that one. So when we do sine, I'm going to start at the negative 3 pi. The very first point on sine is going to be in the middle. And then we're going to do a max. And then a middle. So each one of these is a key point. And then do a min. And then do a middle. So that's one period. And we're just going to continue the pattern. Max, middle, min, max. That's the second period. And then we just connect them. Bless you. Whoa. Try that again. All right. That's it. So our last step is to draw the appropriate curve. So far, all we have is sine and cosine. So those are going to be our appropriate curves, either that, and then we'll talk about what cosine looks like in just a second. Okay, so now let's talk about cosine. So B, this is the cosine curve we're going to graph. So let's just, you guys go ahead and tell me the amplitude, the period, and then because I have addition inside the parentheses, I do have a horizontal shift or a phase shift. So this horizontal shift is a little different. On the last one, because it was just terms, we needed to do the division. On this one, they've already factored out what was being multiplied by the x. So when we do the shift, we just use this number. So it's going to be 1 unit, and then which direction? To the left. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and draw my x-axis. And then directly in the middle, we want to label that according to the way this shifted. So if it shifted 1 to the left, what do you think should be right there in the middle? -1. 1 left means that you start at -1. So -1 is right in the middle. Right, to get the end point at the right, we're going to take that -1 and we're going to add the period to it. And what are we going to get? 3. All right, and then it's just finding what's halfway between these numbers. So if you don't know, it's okay. You can add and then you can divide. So you just add -1 and 3 is 2. Divided by 2 is 1. It's halfway between those two. Right? And then it's fairly obvious. Halfway between -1 and 1 is 0. And then if you add and take half or add and divide by 2, that should be 2. Okay. And then for this period that is going to be graphed to the left of that, we take that -1, and this time you subtract the period from it. And then you can tell, like, from what we just did, you're just going up or down by 1 each time. So I don't think you really need to do halfways at this point. You can if you want to, but I think you can figure it out. All right, where's my y-axis going to go? 0. Oh, let me try that again. All right, there we go. Okay, what do I need to label on my y-axis? 2 and -2. All right. Now, a cosine curve. For those of you that haven't been here, it looks different. similar but different. So cosine always starts up at a maximum, and then you have a middle, and then a minimum, and then a middle, and then a maximum. So all cosine curves are going to look similar to this one, Texas Longhorn. So it's just going to be stretched or shifted or reflected or something, but that's the basic shape. So what we'll do at -5, we should have a maximum up at 2. So it's the point, -5, 2. And then a middle, and then a min, and a middle, and a max. And then we just keep going. And that's what cosine looks like. All right, we have a couple more that we're going to do. The next one is kind of different. This one, are you going to have a horizontal shift on this one? What do y'all think? So for there to be a horizontal shift, you would have to have addition or subtraction in the parentheses. So there's not going to be a horizontal shift, but there is going to be a vertical shift. All right, so I'm going to write horizontal shift and none. And then you can either write vertical shift or you can write midline. So far, what we've been doing in the book is calling the vertical shift a midline. So you guys figure that out for me, please. Okay, so we're going to do the x-axis like we've been doing. So since this one didn't have a horizontal shift, what should be in the middle? 0. So go ahead and draw your x-axis. Put 0 in the middle. All right, at the end should be 0 plus the period, which is going to be 2. All right. Obviously, halfway between those is 1. Now for these fractional, you can do a fraction or you can do a decimal. It's completely up to you. Okay, then when we subtract the period, it's going to be a -2 over there. And there's our y-axis. Okay, so this is the first one that we're doing that has a different midline than 0. So our midline is at 1. So what we want to do is draw a dashed horizontal line at 1. So that's kind of like going to be your new x-axis. It's not, but we're going to treat it like it is. All right. And then, so far, like on our y-axis, we've just been putting like 2 and -2 or 3 and -3 or whatever. It's not going to be like that on this one. So from the midline, our maximum is going to be 2 units above. So what is that going to be? 3. So we need to label 3. What about the minimal? The minimum is going to be -1. All right, so all your maximum points are going to be at 3, and all your minimum are going to be at -1. And all of the middle points are going to be on that dashed line. All right, there's one more thing that's weird about this one. How is this cosine different from the other cosine we graphed? It's negative. So it's reflected across the x-axis. So that -2, or that just negative in general, means that we're going to start at a minimum and not a maximum. So it's going to be like horns down for Texas Longhorns instead of up. So we're going to start like at -2. You're going to have a point at -1. All right, and then your next key point will be at -1.5, but it's going to be up at the midline. And then max, midline, minimum. So we're just passing through the x-axis. It's not really that important this time. I mean, it still gives you x-intercept, but it's just not going to be a key point. All right, any questions on that one? Okay, we have one more to do. So unless you've been gone on the trip, this stuff right here is not new. We've been doing it for 2 days. This is old stuff. It might not be completely solid in your brain, but hopefully it's somewhat familiar to you. Oops. All right, so we're going to end up with 2 units for our shift. In which direction? Right or left? Right. This is a minus. Did y'all not get 2? Okay. So what is going to be the middle of our x-axis? 2 or -2? Did y'all just do this one on your own? I can't tell. Nobody's answering my questions anymore. What do you think? 2 or -2? We'll go to the right? Thank you. I can tell. Like half of you were just doing it without me, and so you weren't answering the questions. It's okay. All right. What about this far right corner or right end? That was going to be 10. We're adding the period to 2. Right? Halfway, we're going to add 2 and 10, which is 12, and divide by 2, which is 6. We can do the same thing here, or you can kind of figure it out. I don't know, but that's going to be 8 divided by 2 is 4. So you can see you're just going by 2s each time. We do need to know what this endpoint is down here, though. -6. And then where we have 0, we're going to go ahead and put our y-axis. What do I need to put on my y-axis? 1 and -1. All right, so you guys, on your own, draw the appropriate curve here. It should match the one that's the sine on the board, but be twice as wide. You're going to do it twice. 2 of them. So every time you graph in a sine, wherever you start, it's at the middle. And then if it's a positive sign, it's a maximum. If it's a negative sign, it'd be a minimum. And then middle, minimum, middle, maximum, middle, minimum, middle. It's a lot of M's. It's not beautiful, but all right. So your assignment is that those bottom 5 graphs. I don't have any notebook paper, but I do have graph paper over there if you want any. If you don't have paper, you can use graph.